The walls of the royal court felt as though they were leaning in to witness his shame. Daffy stood just outside the entrance, his heart a frantic bird trapped in the cage of his ribs. Everything around him spoke of a world he was never meant to encounter. The pillars were wrapped in beaten copper that caught the late morning light, and the air smelt of sandalwood and expensive oils, a stark contrast to the scent of the river water, wood smoke, and the wilds that clung to his skin. The past 2 days had been a fever dream. When he had stepped onto the square, for one singular, impossible moment, the world had revolved around him. His presence had forced the kingdom to pause, almost like a flea catching the attention of the gods. And the queen, she had looked into his eyes and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a ruler acknowledging a subject, it was the smile of a woman seeing a person. That one act of kindness had been more potent than any potion Tari could have brewed. It seemed to have washed away the layers of bitter hatred he had cultivated like a garden of thorns. He had expected a monster, he had found a soul. But reality returned quickly. Once the queen left the square, the illusion shattered. When the crowd realized he was the outcast weaver's son, the nice clothes became a mockery. They had treated him like street trash dressed in stolen fineries. He had slunk back to the outskirts, his head low, feeling the weight of the smashed god in his memory. He wondered if he'd thrown away his only chance at survival. His only explanation was that his mother had gotten to him. The sheer determination that fueled his whatever the price mindset had been diluted by her tears. The guards came in the morning. 3 of them, in polished leather armor, appeared at his mother's hut. "The queen demands you," they barked. He had thought of running, but the dark forest was no longer a refuge. Tari was there, and she would surely know he had betrayed her. To a witch, a broken promise was a debt paid in blood. "Move," the guard grumbled now, gripping Daffy's arm with a bruising force and shoving him toward the entrance of the inner court. They entered a narrow passage, the air suddenly cool and heavy. On either side, the walls were alive with intricate motifs and deep carvings. Daffy's eyes traced the inscriptions at the top and bottom of the passage. These were not mere decorations, they were the aka oha, the charms of the threshold. He could feel the ancient magic humming within the stone. They were etched with a dual purpose, a gentle breeze of blessing for those who walked with a heart filled with good intent, and a suffocating weight of curses for those who carried ill intent. Daffy stopped for a heartbeat. Which side do I belong to? He wondered. He had come to steal her with a gaze. Did his change of heart make him a savior or a traitor? The guard didn't give him time to think it through, shoving him forward with a grunt. As they exited the passage, the space opened into a court so beautiful it stole the air from his lungs. Gold-threaded tapestries told tales of the kingdom's history along the walls. The floor was something Daffy had never seen, smooth terracotta tiles burnished to a gentle sheen. At the far end, Queen Zara sat on her throne with a grace that made the wooden seat look like a living thing. She was surrounded by attendants, women draped in vibrant clothing, who were unfurling bolts of expensive shimmering cloths before her. She looked up when he entered, and the conversation in the room died instantly. The attendants froze, their hands still clutching the fine textiles, as the queen's eyes, the same eyes that had haunted his dreams for the past 2 nights, settled on his face. Being this close, he could behold her in all her ethereal glory. The air seemed to thin. It wasn't just beauty that held him, it was a deep-rooted magnetic pull that felt as old as the river. His heart, which had been hammering in fear, suddenly found a new but heavier rhythm, a steady thrum-thrum that seemed to vibrate in his knees. It was a feeling he knew he didn't deserve, not just as an outcast, but as a traitor to the crown. And yet, he saw it reflected back at him. Queen Zara's regal mask didn't slip, but her pupils dilated until the light brown of her irises was almost swallowed by black. When Daffy, moved by a sudden unconscious instinct, took a single step forward, he heard her catch her breath, a sharp, soft intake of air that echoed in the silent room. The moment was shattered by a hand of iron. "Kneel!" the guard barked, wrenching Daffy to the ground. "Kneel before Her Majesty!" Daffy collapsed to his knees, the polished tiles cold against his shins. Fear was a bitter taste at the back of his throat. Zara sat frozen, her hand gripping the arm of her throne. She was torn. The woman in her wanted to reach out to tell the guard to release him, but the queen knew the weight of the tradition. To show mercy now was to show weakness to a court already whispering things about her. She gave the guard a curt, stiff nod of appreciation. Then she cleared her voice, her royal resonance regained, though it trembled at the edges. "Leave us alone," she commanded. Her eyes swept the room. "I wish to speak with him alone."
The attendants scurried away like frightened birds. The guard, however, hesitated. His hand stayed on his sword hilt, his eyes darting between the outcast on the floor and his queen. He fought the urge to protest, to warn her that leaving an enemy-born outcast alone with her was an invitation to disaster. He knelt beside Daffy, leaning in so close that his breath fanned Daffy's ear. "You will always be a rat," he hissed, the threat a low, venomous vibration meant only for him. "And I will stomp you like the little pest you are the moment you step outside these walls." The guard rose, took a stiff bow, and exited, leaving the two of them in silence. Queen Zara did not move. For the first time in her life, the protocols of her station offered no guidance. She sat on her throne, watching. Eventually, Daffy fought back the shaking in his hands. He rose slowly, smoothing his tunic, and met her gaze again. This time, however, there was no crowd, no guards, and no potion. Only the terrifying truth of two people who should hate each other. Zara broke the silence first. She leaned forward on her throne, her chin resting on a hand adorned with gold rings. "I know your name, Daffy," she said softly. Her voice lacked the sharp edge she used with her advisors. "I know of your mother, the outcast weaver. I know you hunt in the dark forest." Daffy felt a cold shiver. To be known by the crown was never good news for someone like him. "Then you know I have no business here, my queen," he replied. His voice was raspy, conditioned by years of staying quiet to avoid notice. He was already shifting into a defensive posture, his muscles tensed to flee or fight, a reflex from a life where every interaction was a negotiation for his right to breathe. Would things have been much different had he drank the potion? "And yet you came," Zara countered. She stood up now, the hem of her regal dress whispering against the stone. She descended the step of the dais slowly, closing the distance between the highest and lowest points of her world. "You came to the ancestral choosing and presented yourself. Why? What did you hope would happen? That I would consider an outcast to be my suitor?" Daffy watched her approach, his blood rushing warmer in his veins with every step she took. He took one backwards. His mind told him it was over, that he was here to be mocked and ridiculed, but in his heart he felt a profound, frightening pull toward her. Now she was standing before him. He fell back to his knees. His lips seemed to mumble words his mind hadn't thought of yet. "It was my only chance to stand before you, my queen. If I had thought of the consequences, I would have known it would lead me here and possibly to my death. If I had the wealth of a king, I would have filled the square with gold and foreign cloths and spices. But I have nothing worthy of a queen," Daffy whispered, his eyes on the floor. I thought if I stood before you as I am, you would see the truth." He felt a pang of guilt. The truth he spoke of was a lie. He had originally come with a god of poison. Zara moved closer to him once more. He took this as an encouragement to rise to his feet. She caught her breath, her chest rising and falling beneath the heavy weight of her dress. In his presence, the regal weight she carried felt lighter. She reached out, her fingers hovering near the simple clay bead on his neck before drawing back. "What is going through your mind right now, Daffy? Are you afraid of me? What do you feel?" Daffy looked into her eyes and decided to be honest. I do feel afraid. Afraid because that's what I've felt for most of my life in situations outside of my home. Afraid because this is no place for someone like me to be. But for the first time in my life, I can say I am also excited because I am here with you. This is already more than I could have ever asked for. He clutched the clay bead on his chest when he said this and let a weak smile crawl over his lips. What is on your mind, my queen? I don't know, she whispered with a slight scoff. I have spent my life hating the palace. I have spent my life defending myself against your laws. I do not know how to be kind. I don't even know if I am speaking the truth to you or if I am simply a drowning man who has found a branch to cling to.
Zara's expression softened. She saw the turmoil in him, a reflection of the loneliness she felt on her throne. They were two strangers at opposite ends of a broken bridge, and she wondered if the tradition of the ancestors permitted them to cross it. Finally, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind, the ultimate test of his intent. "Tell me, son of the outcast weaver," she said, her voice dropping to a low conspiratorial murmur. "In your wildest dreams, in the quiet of the forest, have you ever imagined being king?" Daffy froze. The question felt like a trap to him. To say yes was treason. To say no was to deny the very ambition that brought him to her feet. He stood silent for a moment, the weight of the question pressing down on him like the humidity before a storm. He knew he had. In the dark corners of their hut, while his mother slept, he had worn a crown of woven grass and ruled a kingdom of shadows. He had restored his father's name to himself and ordered the queen to the same fate she reserved for dark witches. But that all seemed like a past so distant it felt like someone else's dream. Now he looked into Zara's eyes, fearing that her gaze was a mirror into his very soul. He didn't lie. He couldn't. He gave a slow, meek nod. "Most outcasts dream only to be accepted, my queen," Daffy began, his voice growing steadier. "To be seen as normal, to be loved and respected, to have a voice that doesn't falter in public. I was 10 wet seasons old when I learned my father was a high-born warlord. I didn't want his wealth or status. I wanted his honor, his name, to have a place and a role in this kingdom, something I'd been robbed of through no fault of my own." He looked at the polished floors, then back at her. "I have imagined being king, yes, even if only for the time it takes the sun to cross the sky. Just long enough to speak my father's name aloud and have the kingdom acknowledge it. Just long enough to tell my mother she is no longer a ghost in her own home." He shrugged, a boyish gesture that softened his intensity. But children in the mud always dream a little too big for their surroundings. Zara's heart softened. She felt the urge to reach out and hold him. This wasn't the hunger for power Maro was after, or the vanity of the northern princes and wealthy merchants. It was a yearning for justice. "Is that why you walked into the center of the square, Daffy? To ask me to give you back your father's name?" Daffy shook his head. The air between them seemed to crackle, the distance suddenly feeling like a chasm he was finally ready to jump. He took a deep breath, and with a boldness that made his pulse thud in his ears, he took 2 long steps toward her, entering the space reserved for her closest kin. "I came for the name," he whispered, his eyes locked on hers. "But then I saw you. Not the queen, not the crown. I saw the woman who holds the light of the sun, and I realized I would be a fool to leave without trying to find a way to stay in your presence." Zara's breath hitched. No suitor had ever spoken to her like this. They spoke of alliances, of cattle, of borders and power. None had spoken of her as a light. She felt a heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the morning sun. She should have called the guards. She should have rebuked him for his proximity. Instead, she stood her ground. For a moment, she wasn't a queen weighed down by the survival of a kingdom. She was just Zara.
She cleared her throat to regain her composure, but her shaky breath betrayed her. "You speak bold words, Daffy," she murmured, though she didn't move away. Her hand moved instinctively toward the protective charm Maro had given her, but her fingers stopped short. The charm felt cold and heavy, a relic of a world she suddenly wanted to leave behind. "The elders will not accept a king I choose for his heart rather than his lineage. Would you? Would you choose a king after your own heart?" Daffy asked, his voice a low rumble. "Your acceptance is all I care about." For the first time in Zara's reign, the path ahead wasn't clear. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You should go," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't yet name, "and try not to go into the dark forest for the time being." Daffy pulled off his necklace and placed it in her palm. Her pampered skin felt the grit of his calloused hands. "This is what I have, and this is what I present, a piece of me." Daffy bowed without the practiced grace of a courtier before he left. Zara watched him, clutching to his necklace in her hand, her heart beating a rhythm of rebellion that would soon shake the very foundations of the kingdom. On the other side of the passage, the guard gave Daffy a knowing, evil grin. By the time Daffy got back home, his face was bruised and his ribs ached from the stomping he had received outside the palace walls. His mother rushed to him, tears streaming down her face as she cupped his jaw. "She was here," she sobbed. "The witch was here."